Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Children Need Arts. My name is Adam Holm. We're broadcasting from a very beautiful flat which has generously been lent to us by a friend. We are in the heart of Copenhagen. And joining us from another beautiful spot in England, in Canterbury, is none other than Dr. Darren Henley. Welcome, Dr. Henley, or Darren, as you told me I could call you.
Very nice to meet you, and thank you for inviting me along.
And thank you for being with us. You're Chief Executive of Arts Council England. For a number of years, you were part of the brilliant radio program called Classic FM. You've written and co-written a number of books, I believe, in the vicinity of 30 books. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
On matters related to arts and education. And quite recently, you published a book which I can highly recommend. I had the good fortune of reading it quite recently. It's called The Arts Dividend Revisited: Why Investment in Culture Pays. And let me just recommend it for its clarity and its prose, and of course, the views you express. And let me take you up on that aspect, why investment in culture pays. Darren, we all know that at this current moment in history, all governments throughout the Western world, and probably the rest of the world also, are forced to cut down spending on culture. So what would be the good argument at this hour for governments, forced as they are to cut down expenditure, to invest, keep up the investment in art and culture?
Well, obviously, with COVID-19 and the global pandemic, it's been a really challenging time for people across the world. And I think that's something we should all acknowledge. People have had very, very tough time, particularly over the last year. But I think one of the things for me that's really important about investing in the arts, investing in museums and libraries and cultural activities more generally, is that it helps people to lead happier lives. And when you're a government and you're thinking about spending taxpayers' money, I think actually spending that money to make people's lives better is a really, really good reason for doing it in the first place. And I think that there are so many benefits that arts and culture bring to people's lives. So on one level, just being surrounded by creativity is an amazing thing. On another level, we know that there's huge opportunities for young people and their education. We know that there are real benefits from taking part in cultural activities in terms of people's health and well-being. We know that they can really change places, villages, towns and cities can be changed because of cultural institutions. And we know that actually it helps people to tell the story of their lives as well. So for me, there's just so many benefits. And as we come out of the pandemic and we start to think about rebuilding, actually what better thing, what better group of people, what better group of institutions than our cultural institutions and our creative people to lead that journey.
You know, Darren, you have me convinced personally. If I could, I would vote for you. But I'm sure if you're faced with tough politicians who would argue, look, Darren, at this moment, in these times with pandemic, we simply have to cut down on various aspects because supporting culture, supporting the arts, that's sort of the icing on the cake, if you like. And we need to do without that for a period of time. At least that's part of the debate here in Denmark.
Well, interestingly, in the UK, the UK government has actually made a huge investment in a culture recovery fund. So a total fund initially of £1.57 billion, and then actually in our recent budget a couple of weeks ago, a further £300 million announced for that. And so that actually is something that they've really recognised the value that artists and cultural organisations bring to places. And I think, for me, when I step back, I never see this as a binary thing. It's never either or. I think part of what we want to do is to have, and I think this is the same for governments across the world. They want to have places that are great places to live, to work, to study, to grow up. And I think that's really important. And if you took away, I think it's always worth stepping back and just imagining what the world would be like if we took creativity out of it. We would be living in a sort of hamster wheel of the present. There will be no future. There will be no invention. Nothing new. And I think there's a very strong argument for making that investment in our cultural individuals and institutions that enable great things to happen in the world. And so for me, it's never about either or. look, it's really important that other infrastructure is invested in, that we invest in healthcare and education and transport. All of those things are really, really important. But I think that part of the mix has always got to be about our cultural life as well.
Sweet music to my ears again, Darren, but I'm trying, as you can figure out, I'm trying to stick with the sort of critical argument, which is that we need to teach, I mean, you talk about the children, you talk about the youth, we need to teach them literacy, numeracy, you know, these are important, tough qualifications, whereas creativity, creative subjects are probably more sort of considered soft subjects. When you hear that argument, how do you respond?
Well, I think a good education absolutely should have literacy and numeracy at its heart. But I also believe it should have creativity at its heart. For me, the three pillars of a really strong education are literacy, numeracy, and creativity. And it's interesting, you know, some people do say that some of the creative subjects are in some way softer, but I'm not sure I agree with that. I think they're actually very rigorous, and you know, I'm very passionate about young people having the opportunity to study music and art design and dance and drama as part of an overall mix. And again, I think sometimes this can always be reduced to this idea of it has to be one thing or another. For me, a rounded education will include languages and science and history and geography and computers and all those sorts of things. But also it should include subjects like music and dance and drama and art design, because that, I think, together creates a generation of young people who will be able to think critically, to be able to be imaginative, to be able to invent stuff for the future that we need, and our society globally will need. So for me, it's never reducing this down to an either or. It's got to be and.
I'm getting the point, Darren, but I'm sure in your position, and you've held this position since 2015, if I'm correct, you must have come across people who would say, look, Darren, it's a bit of a luxury, you know, to teach creativity. If you look at the likes of, you know, within the fields of music, drama, theatre, film, directing, whatever, all fields of arts in the UK, you've produced a number of great names which have, you know, expanded throughout the globe. They didn't, I mean, if you take musicians, if you take artists, they probably weren't taught creativity at school. It was within them. So that's why, I mean, you cannot teach this thing in a period of dire straits such as now.
So I think that everybody has the potential to be creative beings. I think that everybody can do that. Now, some people will choose to have that creativity and will choose to have careers that are in the arts sector or the performing arts or the creative industries more generally. Other people will become very creative scientists and very creative engineers. You know, I think that it's really interesting. There's a lot of talk around vaccines at the moment. I know, you know, looking at some of the scientists who developed that, I think they are very, very creative beings, and that's really good. So again, I think it's very important that we think about imagination, about possibility. All of these things are about what we understand from employers in the future they will want to have from their workforce. And yeah, sure, you're absolutely right. They need to be literate and they need to be numerate as well. So they've got to have that ability to read and write and to be mathematically aware. But that's not the only thing they should have. And I think, again, it's about saying, how do we position this? And for us in the UK, our creative industries, before the pandemic, were our fastest growing sector. So we're a relatively small island, and actually in literature and film and music and television production over the years, we've done much more than a country of our size. And I think, you know, that's relevant to Denmark as well. You know, a relatively small country, but actually punches above its weight. And, you know, I'm a big fan of some of your Danish TV at the moment. We see that a lot here in the UK. You're a real cultural powerhouse in that sense of creativity. And again, I think it's something that's actually very exciting.
We accept the flattering. Thank you very much, Darren. But just to see if I get this right, what you're saying is that if in school you're being taught art, design, drama, dance, music, it shouldn't be seen as an optional extra, if you like. It should be part and parcel of your curriculum, because it's equally important to being taught how to read, to being taught English in your country, or, you know, being taught mathematics.
Yes, I think that's right, and I think it's interesting. I don't know how this works maybe in other countries, but obviously here in the UK we have a private school system, an independent school system, as well as a state school system. And it's very interesting that when you travel around, I travel around the country a lot, and I see there's sort of posters on train station platforms advertising some of the local private schools. Always they'll talk about, yes, sure, they'll talk about the academic results, but they also talk about sport, and they talk about art, and they talk about music, and they talk about drama. So for people who are prepared to invest extra money and not to avail themselves of the state education and spending quite considerable amounts of money on their young people, their children's lives, they're prepared to pay for that. And I think that's very interesting that the market there in private education actually is driven by a lot of those things. So there's clearly a value attached to having high levels of education in that area. For me, every child should have that opportunity. I want everybody to be able to have a seat at the table and have a shared set of cultural and artistic experiences throughout their childhood, and for them to be recognized actually as creators themselves. So whatever their background, the art and the creativity that they create is really, really important as part of this mix too. And we should recognize them as the next creative generation. And that's exciting because we don't know, you and I being an older generation, we don't know what they're going to create. And that's the brilliance of it.
True. But I'm sure you must have come across, again, going back to the arguments that you might have heard before, politicians who would say, okay, look, it's all very good, Darren, but at the end of the day, what's in it for us as a society in economic terms? What do we actually stand to gain from this? Aren't we merely, posting money into, a big system, and what's the revenue?
Well, in this country, in the UK, our Department of Culture, our government Department for Culture, Media and Sport is responsible for 1 in 6 jobs in the UK. So it's a big employer. So there's a very strong economic argument we can make there. We can also, on a place base, so when we look particularly at towns and cities that have big cultural infrastructure, and you were mentioning to me that you've got the Opera House just behind you across the water. And we have, in London, 2 big opera houses, and they are cultural magnets. So they're responsible for tourism. They're responsible for a huge amount of creativity that's then sold around the world. And it's the same for many other cultural institutions across many different art forms. There's that part as well. But there is also what they do in terms of actually animating and making places great places to live in. So great towns or cities to live in. You can't just have places where you go to work and go home at night. You need to have more. You need to have reasons for people to go out, for reasons to then build other production infrastructure around them, but also other entertainment areas as well. So, restaurants and bars and things like that. All of this is part of a very rich and dynamic tapestry. And I think that cultural institutions sit very strongly at the centre of that. When I talk to people around England and people who are local leaders, local political leaders, they all want to have great cultural institutions in their cities and towns. They see the value of that for the people that live there, but also from bringing other people from outside into their places.
And they're willing to invest in that in terms of, the cityscape, and also in education. Speaking of education, at what stage do you think children should be, heavily exposed to arts, to creative ideas and subjects?
From birth onwards,
From birth onwards.
From birth onwards, and it will be age specific. But I think actually one of the things that's really interesting is when you start to look at young people who might have parents with a little bit more money and parents who are able to be sort of culturally aware. What they're actually doing is giving the young people in their lives opportunities from day one. They're kind of making interventions. So it will be, they will be read to, they'll be taken to museums. Here in the UK, we have a great tradition of Christmas pantomimes, which are, for many young people will be their first time they go to a theatre and they see music and dance and comedy in front of them. And that's really, really important. And so for me, and we have a project actually in one of our cities in our English Midlands in Leicester, where we're actually investing in a project where we're researching 25 years from birth onwards of intervention in a young person's life.
Wow.
What will it do to actually, for the first 25 years of their life, to have really high quality artistic and cultural interventions all the way through? And that's children from all sorts of backgrounds as well. So we really understand how that can give them, I believe it will show that, that their life opportunities change radically because of that.
Okay, that's brilliant, Darren. Just if you could elaborate briefly on what you just said, finally, because my question is, what do you do in the UK to ensure access to the arts for all children, in particular those who grow up under more, economic, challenging circumstances, if you like?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, not everybody has lots of money in their lives, and that's a pure accident of birth, as we know. So this project, which is called Talent 25, we're doing in partnership with De Montfort University in Leicester. And I should say, actually, I think the university sector are really, really powerful partners in a lot of this work. And what we're doing is we are working with a cohort of babies who we've recruited, and we will recruit people. And we'll work them through. So at the moment they're 0 to 1 year old, and then next year we'll be working with them when they're 1 to 2 year olds, and it will keep on going. So we will start working with them in primary school, and then in high school when they get to 11, and then through into their college or university education, and right through to when they're 25. And we're analysing all the way through what this is doing with them. So this is one particular project, but we have a whole range of other things that we do in terms of making sure that young people have opportunities. And I think always the challenge is to make sure that we make that as widely available as we possibly can. And we also work with a network of music education hubs, for example, which through our government, funded through our education department, but that actually is making sure that music education is available to everybody. Here in England, we have a national plan for music education, so that's something that's part of our system of music delivery, and direct government funding to make sure that music education actually is part of young people's lives. Now, I think it's really important to say that not everybody is going to be playing in a professional symphony orchestra, and that's not the outcome. Now, we want to have really, really good levels of progression for people who want to become professional, but for everybody else, having it as something that's part of your life, and actually maybe having a life where you'll spend a lot of time as an audience member, that's brilliant as well.
Dr. Darren Henley, Chief Executive of Arts Council England, thank you very much for being with us from Canterbury.
Thank you for having me, and it's been lovely to have a little glimpse into Copenhagen.
Yeah, and we hope to invite you over here someday, and you'll probably find that we are not as crime-ridden as you see on television.
I very much look forward to that.
Looking forward to seeing you. Thank you very much, Darren. Bye-bye.